there is a table overflowing of good things. And as poets and poetesses who are presenting this material, we simply need to be preferring its presence and confirming its presence. And then we can find others with whom to present and be receivers of presence.
In this episode, you hear our inspiring and almost meditative conversation with Phillip. We spoke to Phillip on his 75th birthday. Phillip has a marvelous and generous way of receiving our questions, as if they're invitations to explore whatever feels most alive for him, like a river finding its way along the banks and curvature of the landscape. Phillip has been suffering from Parkinson's disease, which you will hear him talk about later in the episode. At times you may hear this as ticking and ruffling noises. We invite you to listen to this conversation with eyes closed and a warm cup of tea, and allow yourself to be carried into this world of color, contemplation, and care.
One of the questions that we've thought might be interesting to start these conversations is, imagine you were describing your human experience to an alien who knows nothing about the human experience. How would you start describing that?
Reaching into the unknown, I would, because it is an unknown question and an unknown answer, but reaching into the unknown, I know that I love nature. And so I asked myself this question, what would happen if I was introduced or introducing myself? And there's something about green. First of all, there's green energy, the nature of things, and trees and fields. And then there's blue of the seashore. I just love the seashore. We waited 27 years to come and live by the sea. So there's a greenness of things which is part of me, deeply a part of me, from running on the cliffs, walking in nature, setting up the quiet garden movement. Again, in nature, in the natural context. And blue, the crash and the flash of the green sea. So green and blue, and then multicolored, because the human community of which I'm a part. I hope so, anyway.
If you're not, Phillip, we're all lost. We're just floating around in some space where none of us know who we are. So I'm making the assumption that you are part of the human experience.
I'm glad. That's reassuring. So then the multicoloredness is the community of people who are all hues and shapes and sizes. And of course, all nature is too, but there's something about the multilingual, multicultural, chopped up bits, smooth bits, patterned bits, all flowing. So I'm a part of that. And the seeing of color was, I thought, oh, that's quite nice. Because these are deep, these are colors beyond color. And sometimes there's blackness and grayness and coldness and warmth. So I think I would use that metaphor of blue, green, and multicoloredness.
You're talking about your relationship with nature. There are obviously some really strong stories that you have around nature and your place within it and its place within you. Phillip, if you could tell us a little bit around what are these stories and these myths that shape how you live in the world? Because one thing we should say is it's Philip's 75th birthday today. And he did invite us to pray that he would have another 25 years. So this is definitely, what are the narratives that are shaping your life now and in the next 25 years?
I think the learning of things. I was privileged to have most of my teachers, the people who have been teaching, have been gracious, generous. There was one of my teachers called God, and he was a 6 foot something character, and he would preface most things with saying, especially when I was concerned, "Oh God, Philip, what are you doing?" So he got known in the school as God. So one old battle axe wanted to teach me music, so I started learning the piano. But she was a fearsome woman, and there was something of the fearsomeness of reality that has struck me and remained a thread. It's not only the wow, it is that, but one of my parishioners, when I was running a parish, said to me after one sermon I preached, "Yes, lovely sermon, Philip. That was very rich. But remember, life is not only wow. And there is also the sad side and the shy boy side. One of the archetypes that I've held to be my own is the shy man or the shy boy. I think that is a part of me which has its own glowing, its own lamenting. So whether it's a human teacher or a teacher from scripture or poetry or drama, we'll always find, if it's good stuff and if the people are good stuff, there to be breakthrough points.
Philip, can I ask you just a quick question? You said like a really lovely little phrase when you were talking about the shy man. That's been part of it in your life. And you talked about the glow and the lament around that. I think that was the language you used. Can you tell us a little bit more about how do they turn up for you in your life? How do you experience that glowing and that lament or that sadness?
Mixture of ways. I remember writing on a wooden stool that was in my parents' garage when I was about 14. And I must have held the word love deeply because I painted on the word love on this wooden stepladder. My dad wasn't too familiar or polite about writing poetry all over furniture, but it felt an important receptacle. So somehow these things filter through, and little experiences of one's own failures, and then hopefully some learning, some deep learning from those failures. But they will be contributors in this life as a party, but life is also awake. There's something going on about there's a sadness and a longing. The Welsh call it hiraeth, the longing for the mother country, the longing to be in a place of peacemaking. So it's this intriguing differential, and then it's people's invitation. People who are kind-hearted will make appropriate invitations, so that one finds oneself, I'm being invited here. Now that invitation may lead to dangerous places. So when I did some voluntary work in East Africa, I had an experience where we were walking through the outskirts of Kampala in Uganda, approached a sort of shrine, and I'm quite interested in religion. So approached this and saw it was a crucifix but turned upside down. In other words, it had been desecrated as a symbol. And I thought, oh wow. So again, a wow then happens in a reflective context or a sadness context. So that was perhaps one of the first intimations when I realized there's another side to human community, which is not only multicolored and multilingual and multi-conceptual, but actually there is a tragedy, there is truly a tragic part which enables people to be doing injustice to people. The scripts that people will run by, all of us to some extent, are woven through with dark red, but also green and blue. So I come back to, yes, it's this movement from invitation to proclamation. So we have to tell a story. I am a storyteller and love hearing story, and I'm a lover of the word. I love it. This intoxication by love of word.
I feel, Philip, I feel really moved listening to you. I have many tears in my eyes. It's just listening to you talk. And I have this beautiful image of you painting love on the stool in the garage or wherever it was, and that sense of this thing in you, this story that just wants to be told. This story that's deep within you. I just really interested by you using the phrase of the invite. How does that invite appear for you, or have they appeared in your life?
They manifest themselves. There is like a revelation, and all the great faith traditions, and I'm particularly drawn by the Christian one, but I have huge respect for Buddhist, Sufi, and so on. They will all present themselves as in a stage play. You're suddenly aware of a new character. So a word or a piece of beauty or a flow of the energy of life can suddenly impact or gradually impact. So my inner being then knows this is authentic, and it hurts. Philip in the New Testament, he came to ask Jesus a question. Show me the Father, said this man. And he said, God said, Philip, I have been with you for so long, and yet you still do not know me. And I still carry that sadness around with me. Oh, golly, I can miss connections. So the connection can be laid out, and the aha moments again reappear, disappear, present themselves. This is great. There's a lovely book called Exclusion and Embrace. In other words, we can go from a place of exclusion, which the human community is up to all the time, or embrace. So I know myself to be called out to open my arms, as we all are. We're all called into that dance, the movement. Now I've declared something of myself. This is a scary space. But thank heavens there's somebody here who understands and who loves.
So I've known Philip for a good few years. So I've done many silent walk, retreat, contemplative experience, walked bits of pilgrim pathways in Wales and gone off visiting thin places and stuff. Then I'm aware, Eveline, this is the first time you've met Philip. And I'm just wondering, what's the question or the curiosity that you bring in listening to Philip's story around his experience of being human?
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, one of the things that strikes me when listening to you, Philip, because I think it's so beautiful, the dance that you call it, right? Between the delight and the lament. But one thing that I also really hear, not in your words, but in the descriptions that you offer, is, your love for word or storytelling is the act of creation. So there is this wonderful thing that you describe about the human experience that is not just having the lament or having the delight, but it is about, this motion that we bring. So it can be the embrace, it can be the word, it can be the story. And so I guess I'm curious about your relationship to that creative act.
Creativity is one of the very few words which really fire my heart and my soul. Creativity. I'm quite aware that came, but I think the very essence of the Jesus story is one of God creates. One of the first things God does is God creates. So whether one is working within a God framework where that sort of language is helpful or not, there's the creative movement, the creative engagement reflects the energy of God and the energy of the human. So there's this amazing hallowedness almost, where the holiness of things and the wonder of seeing that holiness becomes translated into creativity. And whether it's poetry or dance or sculpture, that is a call. For me, that's a call. And then to be creative, you need to be a learner. So creativity, yes, please.
I also love the invitation for me that I hear about. All of life is learning. All of life is, the possibility of the teachers. The teachers are everywhere. It is the quality of our attention or awareness, maybe, that we bring to that.
It is. So I was trained as a teacher, and my mother was a French teacher. My sister was a teacher. My father was a lecturer in university. So learning or teaching has been part of my landscape of possibilities. And it is linked to creativity. Creativity, learning, discipleshipping, looking, expecting, sometimes missing the point. So that's the journey of the creative, i.e. people who are touched and opened by creativity. And so I'm not very good at the outcome of creativity, but I love the process.
The things that you're describing aren't things that you do. This is all about who you are at a deep level.
Yeah, I maybe have an additional question then about that, because part of me also wants to make use of the fact that we have 75 years of wisdom in the room. So if you were to describe to me, who doesn't know you, over those 75 years, if it was like nature in her cycles, how might you describe sort of what the 75 years look like from an abstraction? Were there different phases or seasons? Or
I sense that the creative journey is drawing explicitly or implicitly from the tradition. So because this is a mixture of the ancient and the modern, and even the nature of God in the Christian tradition has these words: energy. This is the Eastern Church. Energy and essence. So God's essence is my essence, and God's energy is my energy. My little old lady who preceded me to the grave, as it were, who was this wonderful woman of hospitality in Pembrokeshire in St David's. She would welcome. Her house was on the way to St David's Cathedral, so there was a pilgrim path, and she would welcome people to her house. So people would knock on the door if they were return visitors to St David's. They would go and see Lillian on number 7, the Pebbles, and she would always have the key in the lock. In other words, it was always possible to be opened. And you'd knock on the door, and then she would shout, "Cooey, cooey." And in would walk a parade of people, from a Japanese brain surgeon to a hippie to a bank manager. And these people would come through her front door and would be modeling the mixture of essence and energy. Aha, there is a clue here, a clue to the essence and the energy.
I love the thought of the detective and the clues, that they're being always on the lookout for these teachers. That's my experience is how easy it is sometimes to ignore the clues or to miss the clues. Yeah, because there's other stuff happening. There's other stories appearing about how I should be in the world, and so I'm working at a pace that means I don't have time to notice the clues.
Alice Walker, she had this great phrase: "It pisses God off to walk past the colour purple and not see it." And I thought, what a great thing to say. I had the privilege of setting up this network called the Quiet Garden Movement, and people would come to the Quiet Garden, and the idea was that people were quiet in the Quiet Garden. So we'd have a cup of coffee as a group and go out into the garden, and they would start talking within seconds. They'd go off and be quiet for another 20 seconds, and then it would keep happening. So we can be distracted from distraction by distraction. There is a table overflowing of good things, and there's poets and poetesses who are presenting this material. We simply need to be preferring its presence and confirming its presence, and then we can find others with whom to and be receivers of presence. So presence is another word. How can I be present to this moment, this reality? Great fun, isn't it? One of the teachers we haven't mentioned for me has been having a neurodegenerative disease. Parkinson's is also my teacher. So it's a tough place to be sometimes. But there are many people who are on that tough path too. But if it's a neurodegenerative disease, it means that every answer, "I hope you're feeling better," is cautioned by the inside reality saying, "You're going downhill," because that's the nature of this disease. So that's where the other side comes in. So when I retired, on the day of my retirement, I was due to see the doctor, and he diagnosed me that I had Parkinson's. That was the day of the declaration of my retirement. My little granddaughter, who's 8, she knows that they're troubled a bit by seeing that my hand shakes a lot of the time. So it's a visible reminder to them I've got something wrong with Poppy. They call me Poppy, which is very nice. And we were discussing ways in which my tremor could stop tremoring. So with this little 8-year-old, Riley, we were discussing a few weeks ago what would stop the tremor. And I said a gentle touch on the hand was what would be a symbol for her of wanting to heal. And so now, whenever we see each other, there will be some time in the meeting where my hand inadvertently will start tremoring. And little Riley, if she sees it, will come up to me and just place her little hand on mine. So she's the wise one. Yeah.
I've probably spent most of this conversation gently just crying, actually, to be honest. Been really moved and reminded of, I think there was a word that you used where you talked about preferring things. You know, when we to prefer these things that are around us, like to give them our attention, to give them our energy and our essence. So I've just been really strongly reminded of that.
I think that's kind of to say.
We hope you enjoyed our conversation with Phillip. Here's how he answered when we asked him to describe himself.
We're we're dancing with delight and dancing, but also with lament. So we're constantly having this movement between lament and delight, and both are entirely valid and fascinating and alluring. And then we have the natural world, which I just love, the rhythms of the nature of nature. We're talking about simplicity and profundity and craziness and depth and shallow water and deep water. And all that goes on in my being. And making many mistakes and learning. Fascinating. The energy for learning from the hands of a master or a mistress is really rich. So some of the wisest people I've known have been simple people with a shaking of the salt cellar. Some people who have been exceptional human beings. The fascinating thing is, as we traverse through life, we find, oh wow, a recognition point. Oh wow, this is amazing. So one of my favorite words is wow. But of course the wow factor, oh wow, is one I love. But there is also the other side of wow. There is wonder, but there is deep reflection and pain, and somehow we're caught in the twilight hour. I used to go running on the cliffs in South Wales, and I've always, since I was a boy, loved the dusk, when things were unclear, beautiful but unclear, and you can experience the dark side of the reality and also the lovely side. So there's all these delightful, delicious paradoxes. And so that's the learning journey which one is calling to and which calls to me. So I suppose that's me, really.
In this next part of the podcast, Eveline and Rob will share some insights and inspirations that came as they reflected on the themes of the podcast. Hopefully, these will serve as tools for further reflection for you, our listener.
This is an opportunity for me and Eveline just to reflect and highlight themes that came up for us, and maybe introduce a couple of third things, or maybe a poem or a bit from a book that helps us maybe articulate what we experienced when we were listening to Philip. So the one that I'd like to introduce is, there was a little comment that Philip made, and it was a quote from an author, and he'd said that God gets pissed off when we walk past the color purple and don't notice it. And there is something about the stopping and noticing life that really spoke to me. So I think that's the theme that I'm going to talk about a little bit. How about you, Eveline?
I have selected a poem that was inspired by listening to Philip talk about the delight and the lament of life, and the invitation that we may find something unexpected in those spaces when we lean in rather than try to steer away or protect ourselves from either or.
I think since listening to that conversation, having that conversation with Philip, I've been trying just to pay attention a little bit more to the small things. And I started thinking about what would life feel like for me if I spent more time doing that. And there was a poem by Mary Oliver called The Invitation. Because the other thing when in that conversation with Philip that I noticed was he talked quite a lot about being invited. You know, he talked about the shy man being invited, and it felt like the invitation came from people, but it also came from nature. and whatever the place where he was. So there's this beautiful poem by Mary Oliver, which I'm going to ask Eveline to read, because Eveline reads poetry far better than I do.
Okay, here is Invitation by Mary Oliver. Oh, do you have the time to linger for just a little while out of your busy and very important day, for the goldfinches that have gathered in the field of thistles, for a musical battle to see who can sing the highest note or the lowest, or the most expressive of mirth or the most tender? Their strong, blunt beaks drink the air as they strive melodiously, not for your sake and not for mine, and not for the sake of winning, but for sheer delight and gratitude. Believe us, they say, it is a serious thing, just to be alive on this fresh morning in the broken world. I beg of you, do not walk by without pausing to attend to this rather ridiculous performance. It could mean something. It could mean everything. It could be what Rilke meant when he wrote, "You must change your life."
Everything in me wants to slow down when I hear that. There's the madness of having to do things or achieve things or get things finished by a certain time. Especially I think there's some irony for me in the type of work that I'm interested in, which is about the human experience and enriching the human experience, and yet I'm sometimes not really good at it. I rush too much, so I miss things. So yeah, I feel, and I felt it when we were talking with Philip. I felt like that real sense of just wanting to slow down and to receive every word or every phrase as something of beauty, and to be touched by it, and to notice it.
It actually touches a really deep sadness in me. I can feel that there's this this thing catching me in my throat, especially this little stanza, just to be alive on this fresh morning in the broken world. So I wonder what happens when we live from that really delicate recognition that to be here is such a miraculous feat, that none of this is guaranteed. And I can feel that shift in my body as soon as I hear those words. Wow, what a wondrous thing, this thing to be alive, to have this moment.
And I know that the bit that you wanted to talk about was this, the lament and the glowing, I think was Philip's word that he used. And I think that little stanza that you reread, there's something in there about that, isn't there? There's the beauty of being alive in this broken world, and the two sitting together.
Exactly.
And so I'm very aware of the part of me that wants to fix the broken world. I suppose just to be mesmerized almost by the beauty of just the miracle of just being alive.
Bubbled up from Philip's conversation around it's this thing of being with it, but there's also this unique human quality. And that's the thing I mentioned, I think, as a reflection in our conversation with Philip. This unique human quality of taking action, of the experience moving us in a way, touching us in a way that builds this response, right? Whether that is a creative response. So whether we do something to create poetry or art or action but sometimes it's also, it moves through us and it creates a reaction that can be destructive or painful, but we do something with the response to the brokenness of the world.
Yeah, like you're saying, sometimes the action can be destructive in itself. A response to that, to the pain of the broken world. And then, and I wonder actually if it is the pain of the broken world that we're responding to, or just our own pain.
Maybe there is no such distinction.
It feels like there's a real something about fragility in there as well. You know, because you think about these goldfinches, they're tiny, tiny birds, and they're, you know, hardly weigh anything at all. Maybe it's the same for us as well. Our own beauty is really fragile.
Yeah. And that circles nicely back to this idea when we tend to those parts with our attention. And that's, you know, such a generous act.
It is. Just, God, tell me a little bit more about it.
Well, that's what I really experienced listening to Phillip, was the generosity that seeps out of his way of being, so also his conversation in the world. And I think it's a result of his quality of attention. It feels to me like when we really pay attention to something, it's like the greatest act of kindness maybe that there is. And as soon as we pay attention to something, it transforms the thing itself. There's already an effect on the thing itself. We'll go into the quantum physics of that, although I'm tempted to do that. I think the human pain and the human suffering that comes from pain, which I think are two different things, right? Pain and suffering, I think, are two slightly different things. But the human suffering that comes from pain is often a result of contracting or wanting to push something away, so not wanting to put our attention to it because we find it unpleasant. So we're going to just pretend it's not there, or we're going to put it away for a bit. And then there's actually this suffering that comes as a result. But if you put your attention to it, what often happens is, wow, it wasn't maybe as scary or as bad or as painful as I thought it might be. So I find that such a generous act because it alleviates suffering. Does that make sense?
Because near the end of the interview, when you started talking about his Parkinson's, there was that sense that he paid attention to it.
Yeah.
In a way that was sad, but he didn't. So he was able to talk about that being a teacher in the same way that he talked about a person who he really, really admired or whatever. So he was able to not to differentiate. He paid them the same attention.
Without also pushing away the emotions that came with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's quite a remarkable thing to do.
There was something slightly different that came up for you, or linked but slightly different.
Yeah, I mean, he spoke a lot about the lament and the glowing, as you said. Or maybe the wow and the whoa. I think I made up the whoa, but there was a slightly different tone to the... And that really stayed with me. These two elements of the human experience, and how he had all of these little examples of how all those moments are teachers. If we're listening, then the gift is learning, right? The gift is growth. The gift is... And I really love that. And I saw that was an invitation to me. I think especially around the lament, although I think sometimes we also miss the delight or the glowing, but especially in the lament, where I may stay away from the teaching. But, I don't want to linger in the lament so much. And then that reminded me of this beautiful poem, which I think is quite powerful, by Hannah Emerson. So she's a non-verbal autistic poet. And so you'll notice that in her poetry, she also has this repetition of words, which is partly due to her autism, but it also creates this incredibly powerful alliterative effect, I find. She speaks to this theme in her own way. Shall I read it?
That'd be great. Yeah, good.
It's called Center of the Universe by Hannah Emerson. Please try to go to hell frequently, because you will find the light there. Yes, yes, please. Try to kiss the ideas that you find there. Yes, yes, please. Try to get that it is the center of the universe. Yes, yes, please. Try to help yourself by kissing the hot, hot, hot life that is born there. Yes, yes, please. Try to yell in hell. Yes, yes, please. Try to free yourself by pouring yourself into the gutter all. Guttural, guttural yell. Yes, 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 please. Try to get that you become the being that you came there to be. Yes, yes, please try to go to the great, great, great fire that you created, because you become the light that the fire makes inside of you. Yes, yes, please try to kiss yourself for going there. Yes, yes, please get that you are reborn there. Yes, yes, please begin your day.
There's a bit in there when it really struck me about it's the fire, and it's the fire that you created. Find that really so one of a bit of learning that I'm having at the moment is about sometimes how I can create something which is the very thing that I want to be away from. And it's almost like that sense of, no, what she's saying is, well, you create the fire, and it's okay, step into it. Don't run away from it. So it's really interesting around that.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's you just asked, whose pain is it, the world's or your own? And maybe there's no distinction. Maybe that's also the fire that we create, right? But in all of the poem, that's the invitation, is to go to that place.
It's an invite just to go into that fire.
Yeah.
Without the judgment, you don't want to be there, or you shouldn't be there. No, step into it.
Yeah, and also not taking away, not diminishing any of the intensity that exists there. And I think that's was so beautiful with when Philip spoke about his Parkinson's. He had no intention of taking away the intensity of this neurodegenerative disease and the effect that it has on him and his family. He's very close to the very visceral experience of that, and yet so kind to it as well. And I think that's such strength. I see such strength in that, and courage. And that's what I see in this poem as well. This idea of stepping into the gutter all, the gutter, the guttural yell. There's nothing, it's so visceral, the intensity of that. And yet she's saying, yeah, start your day there, begin your day, go there. Oh, yeah.
So it's just I think that poem, and also Philip's conversation, strip away the romanticism that sometimes gets placed around, your shadow or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's about not, like you're saying, diminishing it. It's not trying to move away from the reality that this is tough, this is hard, this is painful, yet I can be compassionate towards it, or view it with I love the little phrase of, when we look at something with gentle eyes. I wonder sometimes what it will be like for me, or actually sometimes what it is like for me when I realise that, on the simple terms, like my body doesn't do things that it used to do, as you get older, and how willing and gentle I am in the acceptance of that. So do you mean you have this choice of actually, how do I stop that? I don't want that to happen. And I'm just using physical as an example. It can be other things. It can be mental. It can be lots of things. Sometimes that's financial, whatever it is. But there's this thing that's changing, And on one level, I don't want it to change because it's wrapped up in my identity. And what's it like to accept that? I do wonder when I play guitar a lot, and I wonder what it'd be like for me if I got arthritis in my hands and I couldn't play the guitar. I would say it's a bit of excitement and it's a bit of nervousness about one day that the universe will probably check me out on this stuff and invite me to experience something that will be hard. And I will, and the invite will be to step into it.
I think somehow life is the inevitable invitation to step into hard things. I think what to circle it back to this conversation is, wow, when we can keep our attention on the beauty, like Hannah does, like Mary Oliver invites us to do, like Philip invited us to do, then we can be okay, even in the midst of great pain.
If you were going to leave sort of listeners with a question, or to totally ignore like Philip does, or or something maybe just to consider, what would it be?
I feel like it would be around that generosity. What is it like for you to be more? Where do you want to invite your generosity in? And generosity as a result, I think, of your attention. What would it be like if I noticed the things that were already here, the simple things? But I would go further and say, what's the generosity that you experience when you notice the simple things? What's the shift that happens for you? That's it.
Maybe a deliberate experiment of like, for this next hour, I am going to pay attention to the little things, the things that are around me, the things that just appear, to the bird or the whatever it is, the sound, the thing that I notice in a painting, whatever it is, or something. It might be just honor it, stay there with it a bit longer, and just notice it.
Yeah, and then welcome in the wow or the whoa.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. That's what we're leaving you guys with today.
And just as we leave you for this episode of our podcast, I just want to remind you that on the 12th of December at 6:30 p.m. Central European Time, we are having our first couch conversation where we will meet with guests on the podcast and listeners to just go into a little bit more depth around some of these stories that shape our lives. So we hope to see you there.
And then we'll see you next time at a next episode of the On Being Human podcast.